Alrighty, so we are live. I really am excited about having this conversation with Jovany Romero, who's a preferred banker at First Republic, for the following reasons. Too often when we think about money and we think about investments and we think about paying people off and building your startup, we're not thinking about the banking equation about it. And so I was really glad to meet Giovanni because he made me realize it's too often we're not too sure what to do with our banks, and we just open up a bank account and we're just thinking about the money itself, but we're not thinking about the instruments, we're not thinking about the relationships, we're not thinking about any of those things. So that's the conversation we're going to have today. And Giovanni, I would just love it if you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your experience. And thank you so much for doing this, by the way.
Sure, no problem. Like Dilip said, my name is Giovanni. I work for First Republic Bank here in San Francisco, off of California Street. And I have been with the bank or in banking for almost 3 years, and specifically with First Republic for 6 months, which it has been one of the most positive experiences I've had in banking. For its manner in which a banker can approach relationship building, which is very, very key for new companies and startup companies, having that open communication with a banker. So if it's okay, I mean, we can kind of go into the
No, so first of all, when you are a startup, you incorporate. We just had Sally Kay from Cooley had a conversation around how do you incorporate, what do? You get your federal tax number, and then you're going to go open up an account. That's one of the first things that you want to do. What are some of the things you should be thinking about in that moment, in terms of like what kind of account to open up, what are the instruments within the banking world you should be thinking about?
Yeah, so I mean, first and foremost, you need to start off with one operating account. So your basic checking account, where you have high liquidity to it, open access to it, where you can go in and set up an online banking profile, and you can view, it's tangible for you to see what's going in and out of your account. Now, as far as other vehicles, every business is different in the sense that, business go through cycles. Businesses cash flow in and out may come at different parts of the month. Maybe the second quarter of the year perhaps could be different. And that's when a banker would take the time to really understand the business, really have the conversation with the key people in the business, to know if we need to perhaps open up a second checking account, a separate savings account, to allocate some funds in those accounts for some necessities later on down the road. Perhaps it's the third quarter of the year where some funds need to be accessed for a particular purchase.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really great point. I think from the startup world, a good scenario to think about is I open up an account. I'm obviously putting in some of my own funds. I'm bootstrapping what I'm doing. And then suddenly I get an investment. Let's say it's some seed capital, anywhere from $150,000 to $1 million. And I have a budget for that. So I know that I'm going to have some money that's going to come in, and I know that some money is going to go out, but I need to be able to keep track of that whole amount. How would you work with that in terms of like suddenly having someone that has $1 million in a checking account, but the reality is that they don't really need that $1 million available at all time?
Yeah, so what we would do is, well, let me kind of go into a similar relationship that we would have here at the bank. Our day is kind of revolves around customer contact and having those discussions. We have a lot of email, phone call discussions with clients who tell us the very same thing. Some days, they have maybe perhaps between 5 to 15,000, and then they get a large deposit of $1 million and don't feel comfortable with that money being in the checking account for various reasons. And it's just about that discussion. Do we create a separate vehicle, a savings account where you're yielding some money for those funds, or do we talk to some of our partners for asset management? How long is that money going to be there? So like I said, it's an open discussion with the business, and seeing what is suitable for them. Now, perhaps there's a large amount of money in that checking account, but sometimes it doesn't make sense to move the money around, because if you're going to need that high liquidity, or you're perhaps going to allocate those funds to another party, then we may just want to sit on it the way it lies. But yeah, it's just about open communication. That's in reality what it's all about. So.
No, I think that's a really great point. I know we were speaking about this a little bit earlier about how often when I know I've done this, so just full disclosure, I've done it. Like, I just opened up an account because I need an account open. And I'm not thinking about having a relationship with someone just because I just need the money to be parked someplace and I need to be able to pay bills and do payroll and all these other things. But over time, I've learned that you actually need to have a relationship with those folks, because you know what's going on and you know what opportunities are out there in terms of, credit available to businesses and things like that. And so maybe you can speak to a little bit about why it's important to have a relationship with a banker.
Sure. So every industry is so different that not every banker could know specifically, what you deal with day in and day out in your business. Or know that off the top of their head for every business across the board. But what you could do is share with that banker what's important to you. Share with that banker what you may need coming down the road. And having that open communication with the banker is important for those reasons. Now, you could visit every bank on the block and get a totally different personality with bankers, from your major banks, which I won't say any names, and then also with your smaller banks. Now, it kind of goes into that discussion on streamlined sales or one approach for every client versus a banker who can have that open discussion, isn't really strapped down by quotas or anything like that. A banker who's not going to be gone in 6 months or 8 months, and for that reason, I feel like a lot of businesses go into a bank and don't really look to have that meaningful relationship, because they just get sometimes a weird vibe, but it's always recommended for the business and the key spokes people for the business to go in and meet as many bankers as you can. I mean, at the end of the day, this is your business. This is, your backbone. This is how you make your living. So having that trusted partner going and you're interviewing your bank. A bank is privileged to serve the businesses. So, you taking that hands-on approach, putting in a little time in the beginning to really get to know the banker is really crucial, because in that relationship, 6 to 8 months down the road, or maybe a year or two down the road, when you need some other need, you need other things fulfilled, you want to make sure you can rely on this person.
Yeah. So. Well, I'm going to switch over a little bit, because I actually found your story of how you came into banking really interesting, and I was wondering if you could share a little bit about your background and why, of all the things you could be doing, you're obviously bright, you're obviously interested in the world, but you've chosen this work and you have such a passion for it, which is one of the reasons I wanted to interview you, that I was wondering if you could share a little bit about that.
Sure. I was a college grad in 2012, and I actually chased my fiance over here to San Francisco, who's a part-time instructor and a graduate student here at San Francisco State. And one day I just took to the streets and I was just looking for a job, and I just dropped in banks. My mom always told me, like, oh, the great banker hours, and, you're 9 to 5 in and out. So I luckily got on board, with Chase Bank. Now, one of the biggest setbacks, I guess, I experienced through early on in banking is that I loved client contact. I love learning new businesses. I like having open communication with people. But these larger banks are very cookie cutter. You know, they take the same approach to many different businesses. Now, I will give, you know, credit where credit's due. There are bankers in these banks that are highly talented, very client oriented, but you just you don't get enough access to them at your local branches. You know, now I was looking around at different institutions where I could take that, you know, approach, that very hands-on customer service approach. And First Republic, you know, always had a high reputation for client services, and you know, I was able to get on board. Now, one of the things that, like I told you in our previous meeting, that a lot of us here, a lot of the young people here are starting to kind of like want to get access, exposure to startups and small businesses, because the CEO of our bank, who started the bank in '85, is still the CEO. All the senior executives are in their late 60s, you know, and the young blood, I guess, is excited by young startups and you know, the tech industry and young people that are running these companies. So hopefully we can turn the tide and take all the good things that the bank that I work for represent, and bring over some young talents, some young businesses, so we can, you know, perhaps work together.
Great. Well, I really want to thank you, Giovanni, for your time. I also wanted to add, how can people reach you? How can people find you?
Yeah, so you could reach me via email. So J.O. Romero, JOROMERO at firstrepublic.com. That's one way, and I'm sure Del can forward my email to those who have a quick question or want to drop a comment or anything like that. And I can also provide my phone number. 415-831-6688 is the office number where you could ask for me. But if anybody has any questions, or, you know, kind of wants to get an idea of, you know, business specific questions, how you would work well with us, you could always email me or call me.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Giovanni, for your time. I really look forward to establishing a relationship with you as time goes on with our Avion Ventures, as well as some of the startups that are coming through our class. So with that, I say goodbye for another class of Avion Tech School. Take good care.
All right. Bye.
Bye.